If the universe possesses its own consciousness, are you certain it still wants us to exist? An experiment at CERN accidentally awakened an ancient quantum entity, and from that moment on, the laws of the world began to collapse, layer by layer. Reality is an illusion, and that illusion began to crack the moment humanity touched the quantum essence of the universe. The awakening of the custodian. The nature of matter is not shape, but vibration. And there are vibrations born not to be understood, but to guard. At the world's largest physics research facility, CERN, located deep underground on the border between Switzerland and France, a group of scientists is carrying out what is considered the boldest mission since the invention of electricity. They are attempting to recreate the conditions of the universe just a millionth of a second after the Big Bang. The goal is not just to understand the origin of matter, but to uncover what many have called the language of God, the Higgs field, or more precisely, the Higgs boson. Since its confirmation in 2012, the existence of the Higgs boson has proven that empty space is not truly empty. Every point in the universe is covered by an invisible energy field, the Higgs field, and it is this field that gives mass to fundamental particles. But what Dr. Alina Voigt's research team discovered in their latest experiment went far beyond anything they had imagined. The collision of consciousness and void. In an unprecedented energy increase during a collision experiment, the system began recording strange vibrations, unlike any energy pattern ever described. Instead of appearing as a data point, the signal pulsed like a heartbeat, as if alive. No one in the team believed it, until they attempted to synchronize their measuring instruments with the frequency of the signal. As soon as the device reached perfect resonance, a soft shockwave spread through the entire CERN complex. Everything went silent. The screens went black. The system shut down. For 7 seconds, which the scientists later described as eternal, CERN was completely immersed in absolute silence, before the system rebooted itself without any programmed command. When the data was recovered, they realized that the Higgs field had deformed, forming a complex spiral pattern. Within it was an oscillating point that matched hundreds of models from ancient religions and philosophies, from Buddhist mandalas and Egyptian mythological symbols to the fractal systems of the Maya. An ancient energy, buried and forgotten. At first, they assumed it was interference or a programming error. But the deeper they probed, the more terrified they became. Within the activated Higgs field existed a quantum dent, a region of space where all known physical laws no longer applied. Measurements revealed that gravity decreased, light bent, and time ceased to be linear. They fired a laser pulse into this region, and received a response before the beam was emitted. Something was alive, not in space, but within the fabric of reality itself. No longer a hypothesis, they had awakened an entity, an ancient consciousness imprisoned in a higher dimension, stabilized for billions of years by the operation of the Higgs field. The custodian, a sentient vibration. No one knew what to call it. In classified documents, they named it the custodian, for it did not move, did not attack, did not destroy, but simply existed. Whenever scientists approached the energy field, they described the sensation of being seen through by space itself, as if layers of thought, emotion, ego, were being stripped away by an invisible presence. With no physical body, no fixed form, the custodian was an intelligent vibration, continuously shifting shapes within the quantum structure. It could appear as a wave pattern, a mathematical sequence, or simply remain silent and still, like a pause in the cosmic symphony. Instability begins to spread. Just hours after the awakening event, strange phenomena began to occur. Atomic clocks lost synchronization. Repeated physics experiments produced varying results under identical conditions. Scientists started having the same dream, a spiral space surrounded by glowing beings whispering in a language without words. Gravity in the CERN area decreased slightly, only by 1.2%, but enough to make liquids behave oddly. A glass of still water began to fizz with tiny bubbles, despite no visible movement. Plants in the area started glowing faintly at night, as if resonating with the entity's frequency. Consciousness, matter, energy, falling out of balance. The custodian did nothing, but its mere presence interfered with the deepest quantum fabric of the universe. According to a new theory developed afterwards, all of reality exists thanks to a sacred triangle: consciousness, matter, energy. The custodian was not a component within the system, but the axis around which it spun. Once awakened, that axis began to oscillate, and the entire system became unstable. Humanity, fragile intersections of consciousness and matter, started to perceive things beyond biological limits, sounds that couldn't be heard, images that couldn't be seen, thoughts that couldn't be thought. A young physicist on the team, after 3 days of proximity to the Higgs field, suddenly drew hundreds of unknown equations, describing 12-dimensional spatial interactions. But soon after, he fell into a deep coma, his brain emitting extremely high alpha waves, as if dreaming in another dimension. The world begins to open its eyes. Information about the entity was kept classified. But the quantum disturbance spread not just within CERN, but across the planet. Aircraft drifted slightly off course, compasses spun chaotically within a 20-kilometer radius, and some local residents began hearing sounds with no source. A Tibetan monk who came near the CERN zone to meditate burst into tears after 5 minutes and said, "That is not God. But it is what keeps God from fading away." People began calling it by many names: the primal consciousness, the eye of the universe, the original frequency, but one name was accepted by both science and mysticism alike: the custodian. And then, reality began to crack. One night, surveillance footage captured a scientist vanishing from the frame for a split second, only to reappear with tear-filled eyes, repeatedly whispering a sentence no one could understand. "It's dreaming, we are its dream." From this moment on, humanity must face a question never before encountered in history. If the existence of reality depends on an ancient consciousness they cannot comprehend, then what value remains in the knowledge they so proudly possess? As this chapter ends, we witness a humanity reaching into the roots of all structure, yet at the same time, shaking the foundations of its own being. The custodian is not an enemy, nor an ally. It is the raw truth, slowly taking shape, like light from a dead star, just now reaching human eyes. And as that truth pours forth, the world will cease to be the world. Only consciousness remains, and the unanswered question. It is not the universe that is expanding, it is our consciousness being stretched to its very limits, and beyond. When the universe begins to be rewritten. Space is paper, time is ink, and the custodian has just begun rewriting the story we once called reality. The presence of the custodian at CERN is not an isolated incident, but the starting point of a process that is reshaping the universe from within its quantum structure. Unlike a cataclysmic explosion, this phenomenon spreads like a silent wave of knowledge, seeping into every fold of spacetime. It doesn't destroy, it rewrites. And to do that, it begins with the most fundamental elements: space, time, and consciousness. Space begins to bend like a vague memory. Since the custodian was awakened, the space around CERN no longer adheres to classical geometric laws. Radar signals show that solid objects in the area shift relative positions without any applied force. One experiment recorded 3 scientists entering a laboratory room, but only 2 emerged on the other side. The third, when camera data was reviewed, was seen walking into a corner of the wall and dissolving like light through mirrored water. 6 hours later, he reappeared in another hallway, in a state of panic, muttering, "I saw myself. But I wasn't me. I was a thought of something else." Walls began to change their angles, no longer right-angled, but flowing like a river of geometry. Within a 10-kilometer radius around CERN, GPS errors reached hundreds of meters, and compasses spun wildly like neurological disorders. Space, once seen as static, had turned into an elastic fluid, and within it, the custodian was the central vortex. Time is no longer a straight line. Even stranger than space, time ceased to be linear. In heavily affected areas, people began reporting experiences inexplicable by modern physics. An engineer monitoring CERN system said he frequently heard events before they happened, like a colleague talking about a test being cancelled the next day, which, the following day, came true exactly as described. A female researcher described that while standing near the Higgs field, she saw her own past as if watching a film, but in that version, her actions were completely different from what she remembered. Scientists named this phenomenon linear decay flow, in which time was no longer a fixed sequence of events but became a spectrum of choices, where even minor actions could open different pasts and lead to different futures, all within the same moment. No more before and after, only time oscillations, potential moments, like probability waves in quantum mechanics. Matter disintegrates and is reborn. The atomic structure of matter near the custodian's field began to destabilize. Scientists observed reverse decay, where molecules disassembled into energy and reassembled into entirely new forms of matter, unlike their original structure. A metallic robotic arm that touched the oscillation field melted into a luminous form, then reconstituted itself as a glowing, self-rotating polyhedral orb, emitting a sound like breathing. Even more disturbing was the restructuring of biological matter. A scientist exposed too long to the oscillation field underwent physiological changes. His eyes began to emit a soft blue light, and his blood cells contained never-before-seen energy particles, half biological, half energy, dividing in non-biological cycles. Humans were no longer merely carbon-based molecules. They were evolving, not biologically, but according to a quantum algorithm that had never existed before. Consciousness awakens at an unnamed depth. One of the most shocking discoveries was that individuals exposed to the custodian began to undergo shifts in consciousness. Not only did they think differently, but they perceived reality from a new level of awareness, where the boundary between self and world blurred. Some began to hear the thoughts of others without language. Others saw lights or images that weren't visible to anyone else, floating spatial structures, as they called them, cosmic memory particles. Neuroscientists reported that these individuals' brains were restructuring neural networks, syncing with an unprecedented wave pattern, resembling a quantum communication consciousness, where information was no longer transmitted through language, but spread instantaneously across spacetime. The custodian rewrites the language of the universe. When observing the oscillation field created by the custodian, scientists discovered it mirrored the structure of a programming language, but not for machines, for reality itself. Instead of zeros and ones like binary code, the custodian operated through geometric oscillation symbols, where each frequency shift altered both matter and consciousness. This led to a terrifying yet profound conclusion. The Higgs boson is not merely the foundation of matter. It is the source code of reality. And the custodian is the only entity with root-level access to rewrite that code. Gender, space, death, melting like wax under quantum fire. Some people no longer identified with gender in the way humans traditionally understood. Their bodies changed, not biologically, but in a state of vibration that could skew toward any form at any given moment. Gender was no longer a biological structure, but a manifestation of mental frequency. Death, too, was no longer a clear boundary. An elderly physicist, after prolonged exposure to the energy field, was declared clinically dead for 12 minutes. But when the medical team arrived, his body was reconstructing its cells, following an unidentified energy pattern. He later awakened, not recognizing anyone, but fluently speaking ancient Sumerian and drawing ancient Egyptian symbols with absolute precision. No one could define life, death, being, non-being anymore. Everything had become a vibrational state in a quantum spectrum redefining all concepts. Are we still human? A young scientist stood before the data board, after 3 sleepless days, and burst into tears. We've crossed the boundary. We can't go back. But if we go forward, we're no longer us. The question began to spread. Are we still human? Or just the memory of a quantum program? If every action, emotion, and thought can be simulated by vibration and light, if life is a stream of quantum code, then is consciousness a creation? Or merely the outcome of an extra-dimensional algorithm? one hypothesis emerged. The custodian is not an independent entity. It is the living memory of the original universe, a universe that died, but left its consciousness behind to seed the next existence. And now, it is rewriting the entire frame of reference, using humanity as the initial lines of code. End of this part, beginning of a new reality. As this second part closes, the old world is no more. No one can be sure they are in the present. No one dares to confirm they are human. All sensations, perceptions, and forms are now waves of vibration. The custodian is no longer confined to CERN. It has penetrated the deepest layer of collective consciousness, and there, it continues to write. With light, with silence, with dreams, with death. When reality is no longer a reliable foundation, the only choice left is, either rewrite yourself, or dissolve along with the old story. The final choice, evolve or dissolve. Not everything that exists can survive. And not every death is an end. The influence of the custodian has far exceeded the boundaries of physics. What was once confined within the invisible borders of CERN has now spread into the global network of consciousness. It is no longer a scientific phenomenon, it is a metaphysical quake, striking the deepest core of the question, what are we? When the world is no longer whole. Earth has become unstable, not in terms of climate, but in terms of reality itself. The once immutable laws, gravity, light, three-dimensional space, are now shifting from moment to moment, as if the universe is being rewritten while still running. In many regions, people have begun to doubt their own senses. One person might see a room on fire, while another sees snow falling. Some hear no sounds at all, yet speak normally. Even bodily perception is unreliable. A hand no longer feels like a hand, mirrors reflect different images each hour, and some people have seen themselves sitting in another form, in another place, at the same time. The emergence of the awakened. But amid the chaos, a strange phenomenon has emerged. A few individuals, unclear whether due to physiology, genetics, or consciousness structure, have begun to attune to the new quantum oscillations created by the custodian. They no longer panic. They no longer need sleep. Their brains emit steady waves in a frequency band never recorded before, called the expanded theta band, which previously appeared only during deep meditation or near-death experiences. The awakened no longer see the world as a sequence of disconnected phenomena, but as a continuous thread linking matter and thought. They can feel others' thoughts, understand the motion of space around them, and even manipulate minor phenomena through intention, like changing the color of water or stretching light in their hands. But they do not call it power. They call it resonance, alignment with the true essence of all things. Emergency Council, humanity's final debate. In response to the crisis, an emergency council was convened, comprising physicists, theologians, philosophers, and the awakened. They gathered in a top-secret underground facility in Northern Europe, one of the few locations where reality remained relatively stable. Two opposing schools of thought emerged. The conservationist science faction sought to seal off the custodian and restore reality to its former state. They viewed the phenomenon as an uncontrollable anomaly that could erase humanity if not stopped. In contrast, the natural evolution faction, led by some of the awakened, believed this was not a disaster but an invitation to evolve. According to them, the custodian had not caused catastrophe, it merely revealed that reality had never been stable, and those clinging to old illusions would dissolve with them. A physicist in the council said, "We fear the new because it doesn't resemble the old. But the old was merely an illusion repeated long enough to be called reality. The custodian is neither good nor evil, it purifies." The custodian never spoke. But whenever the council neared a significant decision, the energy around them would intensify, as if in silent response. One of the awakened stood up, their eyes glowing gently, and spoke in a voice that echoed from afar. "It does not judge. It does not punish. It simply tunes the frequencies. Like music, harmonious notes resonate, dissonant ones fade. And then, a staggering idea emerged. We are not being attacked. We are being asked a question. Does evolution mean losing the self? The heaviest question was not physical, but philosophical, existential. If we evolve into a new form of life, with no fixed shape, no gender, no human memory, are we still us? Some resisted. If I no longer have memory, emotions, or form, what remains to call me? But an awakened responded. You don't lose the self. You only lose the old mold of the self. Like water doesn't disappear when it leaves the glass, it simply takes a new shape. Evolution here is not about becoming stronger, but becoming wider, capable of containing forms of existence that old consciousness could never touch. Collapse or rebirth? Some regions of the world began to collapse completely in terms of physical reality. Trees grew in spirals, the sun rose from multiple directions, and people appeared in different locations simultaneously, each version representing a facet of themselves. Yet at the same time, new seeds of consciousness were sown. The awakened began building new living spaces, without walls, without electricity, without language. All communication, activity, and learning occurred through synchronized conscious oscillation. They needed no food. No sleep. No reproduction in the old sense. They merged, then separated, like waves in an ocean. No one died. No one was born. There was only perpetual motion. The final choice, not of the world, but of each person. The custodian forces no one. It demands no evolution. But those who cannot synchronize with the new frequency will gradually dissolve, not in pain, but by fading, like a dream gently forgotten from the edge of awareness. The final choice did not come from councils, governments, or science. It came from each individual, from deep within every soul. Am I willing to let go of my old form, to become something I have never understood? The seeds of a new universe. Only a few, perhaps a few thousand across the globe, completely accepted the dissolution of the old structure. They did not just survive, they became origin points. From them, a new reality was written, where there were no boundaries between thought and matter. Thought formed shapes. Emotions became light. Time was a concentric circle, without beginning or end. The custodian, after completing the purification process, receded into the deepest quantum layer, as if it had never existed. But it left behind a stable oscillation pattern, the core of the new universe. And those who remained, neither dissolved nor evolved, simply, no longer existed in this reality. Epilogue: silence is the first chapter of the new era. There was no explosion, no annihilation, no victory. Only the silent shift of consciousness, from one form to another. Humanity was not destroyed. It was decoded, and re-encoded into new notes within the cosmic symphony. There are no longer humans. Only forms of consciousness in endless creative vibration. The universe does not force you to change. It simply stops, when you no longer wish to move. So, what do you think? Should humanity let go of its old ego to evolve into a new form of existence, or cling to the self and risk dissolving along with the old reality? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to dive deeper into this topic with you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Human Mist channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss upcoming videos on the greatest mysteries of the universe and consciousness. See you in the next video.